At the family barbecue, my sister chuckles. "How does it feel being the main losers here?" she says, loud enough for every aunt, uncle, and cousin to hear. I stand there, clutching my paper plate so hard the grease from the burger seeps through, my face burning as laughter ripples around the picnic table. The smell of grilled corn and hickory smoke hangs heavy in the air, but all I taste is the bitterness rising in my throat. My name is Dahlia Mercer. I'm 28, the quiet one, the one who works hard, pays her bills, and somehow still manages to be the family disappointment. To them, I'm invisible unless there's a joke to be made at my expense. My younger sister, Brielle, thrives on it. She's 25, golden-haired, charming, the one everyone calls the star. She knows how to command a room, and she does it now, smirking at me as if she's scored a final point in a game I didn't even agree to play. "Still single, still broke, still living like you're in high school," she adds, her voice syrupy sweet, but the bite cuts deeper than she realizes. A couple of cousins chuckle. My mom tells her to hush, but it's half-hearted, the way someone might tell a dog to get off the couch without meaning it. Dad pretends he didn't hear. It's always been that way. Brielle's always been the favorite. In high school, she spread rumors about me dating a teacher, and somehow I was the one who got grounded. In college, she swooped in on my boyfriend, parading him around the house as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My parents called it youthful mistakes, but for me, it was betrayal that never healed. Now here we are again, and she's playing her old role, center stage, making sure everyone sees me as the failure. She flips her hair over her shoulder, the diamond on her engagement ring catching the sunlight, sparkling like a weapon aimed at me. "Don't worry," she says with a laugh. "Maybe someone out there wants that." She waves her hand at me as though I'm a punchline, a walking cautionary tale of what not to become. I want to shout, to throw my plate across the yard, to tell everyone exactly what she's done to me over the years. Instead, I swallow hard and let the silence choke me. That's always been my role, the quiet sister, the one who takes it. But this time, something inside me shifts. It's small, like the click of a lock opening, but I feel it deep in my chest. I keep my head down, take a slow breath, and let Brielle bask in her moment. Let her laugh. Let them all laugh. They don't know it yet, but things are about to change. When I think back, Brielle's words at that barbecue weren't new. They were just the latest chapter in a long history of her, making sure I stayed beneath her. She's been pulling strings against me since we were kids. I remember sophomore year, when a rumor swept through school that I'd been sneaking around with a teacher. I walked through halls with whispers chasing me, heads turning, notes passed under desks. I hadn't done a thing, but the story stuck. Months later, I found out it was Brielle who whispered it into the right ears, all while smiling in my face as if she was my biggest supporter. By the time I got to college, I thought I had a fresh start. I met someone, finally felt like I belonged, and for once, happiness seemed possible. His name was Jordan, and he treated me like I mattered. But it wasn't long before Brielle paid a visit to campus. Within weeks, Jordan stopped returning my calls, and soon after, he was sitting across from her at Thanksgiving dinner. She didn't even look ashamed. She looked proud. That was her way, slipping in, taking what wasn't hers, and somehow convincing everyone else that she was the one who deserved it. She had this knack for twisting a story until I came out looking petty if I objected. If she copied an essay idea of mine, my parents called it sisters thinking alike. If she slid into my circle of friends and pushed me out, they called her social. Every slight was brushed away with compliments about her personality, while I was told I should learn from her example. The cruelest cut came years later. I was engaged to Travis Coulter, a man I truly believed would stand by me. We'd planned a fall wedding, picked colors, even put down a deposit on a venue. Then one day, out of nowhere, he told me it wasn't working. No explanations, no real reason, just a sudden end. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong, maybe I wasn't enough. It took months before I stumbled on the truth. A friend from work saw him leaving a bar with Brielle, her hand tucked into his like it had belonged there all along. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He admitted he'd been seeing her, said it just happened. Like betrayal was some kind of accident. Brielle never apologized. She just shrugged and told me it wasn't her fault if men gravitated toward her. That was the day something inside me hardened. I stopped trying to compete, stopped trying to prove myself to parents who couldn't see past her smile. I pulled back, built walls, and told myself the safest way to survive was to stay out of her orbit. Quiet bitterness became my shield. Distance was my only protection. But shields can only hold for so long. Most days, my life moves in quiet routines. I clock into the billing office at 8, spend hours cross-checking codes, correcting clerical mistakes, and answering insurance calls. It isn't glamorous, but it's stable. My paycheck covers rent, groceries, and the car payment. I've made peace with modesty. It feels safer than chasing dreams that collapse. Still, in my family's eyes, modest translates to failure. Brielle thrives on those comparisons. At the same gathering where she cornered me before, she paraded her fiancé, Cameron Riles, like a prize bull. He's tall, broad-shouldered, with that kind of charm that wins over every uncle in the first 5 minutes. He runs a contracting business that's apparently booming, and Brielle made sure no one forgot it. Every introduction came with a highlight reel of his earnings, his new truck, and the house they were supposedly building together. She turned their romance into a performance, and I became the backdrop. Between sips of her drink, she leaned close to the crowd and said things like, "Some of us are building futures, while others just file papers." Her voice dripped with that same sweet cruelty she's mastered, and the group around her broke into uneasy laughter. I caught one cousin stifling a smile, another uncle nodding as if she'd spoken some great truth. It was the way she lingered on certain words, futures, success, security, as though my life held none of those. Her eyes flicked to me every time, daring me to object, daring me to show anger so she could play the innocent victim later. I kept my lips pressed tight, nails digging into my palm, praying no one saw how my throat closed up. The laughter cut sharper than her words. A few relatives even added their own comments. "Well, Brielle, you've always been the ambitious one," someone said. Another chuckled. "Dahlia, maybe she'll hire you as her secretary." They thought it was harmless fun. It never is. I couldn't sit there any longer. My chest felt heavy, the air too thick to breathe. I slipped away, ducking into the downstairs bathroom, locking the door behind me. The mirror reflected swollen eyes and a trembling lip, but I didn't let the tears fall until I sat on the edge of the tub. My sobs were muffled by the hum of the fan overhead, small enough no one outside would notice. I pressed a fist to my mouth, forcing myself quiet. That's what I've always done, break down in silence so she could shine without interruption. But as I sat there, cheeks wet, a thought cut through the despair. I can't let her keep doing this. That moment, grief hardened into resolve. I whispered to myself, steady and certain, "This is the last time she humiliates me." A few days after that cookout, I found myself lingering near the drinks table at my aunt's backyard get-together. The air buzzed with small talk, kids shrieking over water balloons, the smell of sunscreen sharp in the late sun. I wasn't looking for anything more than a quiet corner, but my cousin Ronan Hale drifted over, lowering his voice as though he'd been waiting for the right audience. "You heard the talk about Cameron?" he asked casually, eyes scanning the yard. I shook my head, wary. Ronan leaned closer. "Word is, he's got company on the side. Not exactly the loyal type Brielle brags about." The words landed like a stone in my stomach. I wanted to dismiss it, to chalk it up to Ronan's love for drama. But his tone carried that dangerous certainty, the kind that clings because it's probably true. I smiled faintly, said nothing, but inside my pulse quickened. For years, I'd trained myself to step back, to let Brielle play her part without interference. This time, though, something wouldn't let me. I tucked Ronan's warning away, but from that moment on, my eyes sharpened. The chance to test that instinct came at a Sunday dinner. Our parents had gathered everyone around the long oak table, bowls of mashed potatoes steaming, the smell of roasted chicken heavy in the air. Conversation hummed, Brielle glowing as always at the head beside Cameron. She leaned into him, whispering in his ear, laughter ringing out. To anyone else, it looked like devotion. But my attention locked on the way Cameron slipped his phone under the table, thumb flying across the screen. I watched the glow of his messages reflect in his glasses. His expression was too intent, too private for harmless chatter. Then, in the middle of my mother passing bread, he excused himself. "Back in a minute," he muttered, already sliding from his chair. The door closed behind him, and minutes stretched thin. Brielle didn't even notice, too busy soaking up compliments about her engagement ring. I couldn't take my eyes off the hallway where he'd vanished, an uneasy coil tightening in my chest. It wasn't just Ronan's rumor anymore. I'd seen the secretive texting, the abrupt exit, the care he took to avoid anyone noticing. He didn't look like a man building a future. He looked like a man covering tracks. I pressed my fork into the chicken on my plate, appetite gone. My gut spoke louder than any gossip, louder than any denial Brielle might offer. Her picture-perfect romance had cracks, and I had just glimpsed the first fracture. Her perfect life wasn't perfect at all. I couldn't shake the image of Cameron slipping out of that dining room, phone clutched tight, face set in secrecy. Doubt gnawed at me until it turned into something sharper, a need to know. So, when work let out early one Friday, I took a detour downtown. I told myself it was nothing more than curiosity, but my grip on the steering wheel betrayed the urgency pumping through my veins. The hotel sat near the river, glass front catching the afternoon sun. I parked across the street, half hidden by a line of cars, heart pounding in a rhythm that made my hands shake. I waited. Minutes crawled. Then the doors opened, and there he was, Cameron, shoulder brushing against a woman whose laughter carried even across the traffic. He wasn't nervous, not cautious. He was comfortable, like this was routine. At first, I couldn't see her face. She tilted her head, hair falling forward, and my stomach twisted. When she looked up, recognition struck hard. Sloane Carr, Brielle's closest friend, the one she called a sister. I'd seen them arm in arm at holidays, giggling over secrets I was never invited to hear. And here she was, leaving a hotel with the man Brielle planned to marry. I fumbled for my phone, nearly dropping it as I raised the camera. My thumb pressed the screen again and again, catching them stepping onto the sidewalk, Cameron holding the door for her, their hands brushing too easily. Each click of the shutter tightened the knot in my chest. Proof. Real, undeniable proof. But mixed with the rush of vindication came something I didn't expect, fear. What if Brielle turned this around like she always had? What if she made me the villain again, accused me of fabricating everything out of jealousy? My breath came quick, the tremor in my hands nearly blurring the images. Still, I kept going, desperate to capture every angle, every telltale glance between them. When they hailed a cab together, Sloane's hand slid onto Cameron's arm, as though it belonged there. That was the last shot I needed. The cab pulled away, and I sank back into the driver's seat, chest heaving. For once, the balance had shifted. I held something Brielle couldn't laugh off, couldn't twist into her favor. My phone, warm in my palm, carried the kind of truth that shatters facades. For the first time in years, I wasn't powerless. I had a weapon, and it was hers to feel. All weekend, the photos burned in my pocket like a live coal. Every time I looked at them, my first instinct was to march straight to Brielle's house and shove them in her face. A part of me even wanted to warn her, to give her a chance to escape the disaster waiting in her future. But each time that thought surfaced, memories piled on top of it. Her smirk across the picnic table, the way she stole Travis, the sting of being called less than for most of my life. Compassion withered under the weight of all those years. I sat awake one night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the idea of confronting her in private. If I told her quietly, she'd spin it into another tale about jealous Dahlia trying to sabotage her happiness. She'd paint herself the victim, and I'd once again be the bitter sister, bitter without reason. I knew the script too well. I'd lived it too long. No, this time had to be different. If she wanted to laugh at me in front of everyone, then she would learn how it feels to be stripped bare before the same crowd. The thought settled in my chest with a calm, steady weight. The only way she couldn't twist this was if the truth came out under the brightest lights, where every witness saw it all at once. As if fate itself agreed, invitations had already gone out for her engagement celebration. A rented hall catered food, relatives flying in. It was going to be the grand showcase of her life. Perfect, I thought. The very stage she built for herself would become the place where her fantasy collapsed. I imagined the moment, the toasts, the applause, the glowing couple front and center. Then me, stepping forward with the evidence she couldn't deny. The same mouths that once laughed at my expense would see her crumble. I pictured her ring clattering to the floor, the silence heavy, the smugness wiped clean. For years, she choreographed my humiliation, making sure I played the role of loser in her story. This time, the script was mine. I wasn't doing it out of spite alone. I was doing it because she needed to finally face the cost of her cruelty. So I tucked the photos into a new envelope sealed tight. My hand didn't tremble as I wrote her name across it in black ink. The decision was final. Her party would not end the way she imagined. The hall shimmered with string lights draped across high beams, their glow reflecting off crystal glasses and polished floors. Tables were dressed in ivory linens, bouquets of white roses placed at the center of each. A soft hum of conversation filled the room, mingled with the clink of silverware against china. This was Brielle's masterpiece, every detail calculated to display her triumph. She made her entrance in a dress that looked stolen from a bridal magazine, ivory silk hugging her figure, sequins catching every flash of the photographer's lens. Guests gasped, showering her with praise, while Cameron walked proudly at her side. Together they looked like a picture meant for a glossy announcement card. When her eyes found me across the room, her smile sharpened. She drifted over, glass of champagne in hand, gaze sweeping over my modest navy dress. "Simple choice," she remarked lightly, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "But I suppose it suits you. Not everyone needs to shine." Laughter fluttered through her circle, polite but pointed. Then, as if the knife hadn't gone deep enough, she added, "Still no plus one? Dahlia, you're going to start making people wonder if you've sworn off men entirely." I answered with a smile that didn't reach my eyes, my hand brushing against the purse resting on my lap beneath the tablecloth. Inside it, the envelope lay flat, edges crisp against my fingers. My heartbeat drummed so loud I wondered if anyone else could hear it. The evening moved forward with choreographed ease. Dinner courses served, waiters gliding between tables, relatives lifting glasses in small toasts. Cameron stood finally, commanding the room with practiced charm. His voice carried across the hall, rich and certain. "I've always believed commitment is built on honesty," he said, gaze sweeping the crowd. "On loyalty, on trust. With Brielle, I've found all of that and more. She isn't just my fiancée, she's my future." His arm slipped around her waist, drawing her close as guests erupted in applause. The words seared, each one ringing false against the images tucked inches from my hand. My chest tightened as I imagined the photographs sliding across polished wood, faces around the table turning, silence falling heavy. The lies in his speech only fueled my resolve. Brielle basked in the admiration, eyes glittering, soaking in every drop of attention. I kept my posture steady, forcing calm onto my face, though the pulse in my wrist raced. The stage was set. My moment was coming. Cameron's words were still hanging in the air, his hand resting proudly on Brielle's shoulder, when I rose from my chair. My movement drew a few curious glances, the scrape of my chair legs cutting through the applause. I steadied my breath, lifted my glass halfway as though I were joining the toast. "Congratulations," I began, my voice even measured. "You've both built quite the story tonight." A hush rippled through the hall, heads turning toward me. My hand slipped into my purse, finding the envelope. The paper crackled softly as I drew it out and set it on the long banquet table. With deliberate care, I slid the contents forward, photographs fanning across the polished surface. The glossy images caught the light. Cameron's profile beside another woman, their hands brushing, laughter frozen in still frames outside that hotel. The reaction was instant. Gasps rang out, chairs creaked as people leaned forward. A fork clattered to the floor. Brielle lunged, snatching the photos with trembling fingers. Her skin drained of color as her eyes darted from one picture to the next. "What is this?" she demanded, voice cracking. She turned toward Cameron, her words rising to a shriek. "What the hell is this?" Cameron's face blanched, his mouth opening and closing with no sound. "It's not what it looks like," he stammered, but the words carried no conviction. The audience of relatives and friends stared at him with a mixture of shock and disgust, their earlier admiration vanishing in an instant. I didn't move, didn't flinch. My voice cut through the chaos, steady as stone. "You've always laughed at me for being the loser," I said, my eyes locking on Brielle. "But at least I'm not marrying one." The room erupted. Voices overlapped, some calling out Cameron's name, others whispering to one another in disbelief. Brielle shoved him hard in the chest, her scream raw and furious. "You humiliated me," she shouted, shoving the crumpled photographs against his shirt. Cameron tried to reach for her, his protests drowned out by the storm of noise. Around us, the perfect party disintegrated. Guests stood from their chairs, some gathering coats, others pointing at the evidence strewn across the table. The music, still playing faintly in the background, felt absurd against the chaos. I stayed rooted to my place, calm in the center of the storm. For once, it wasn't me shrinking under laughter. It was Brielle, undone by her own life unraveling in front of everyone. The room fractured the moment Brielle hurled the ring. It hit Cameron square in the chest before clattering onto the parquet floor, spinning in widening circles until it stilled. His face flushed crimson, his hand darting uselessly as if to catch both the ring and the situation. Then, without a word, he turned and pushed through the crowd, the doors banging shut behind him. A stunned murmur spread like wildfire. Relatives bent close to one another, lips pressed to ears, their eyes flicking toward me. Some narrowed in disapproval, as if I'd gone too far. Others gave the faintest nods, subtle acknowledgments that someone had finally broken the spell Brielle cast over this family for years. Brielle's heels clicked hard against the floor as she stormed across the space, her face twisted with fury. "You've ruined everything," she screamed, shoving the empty glass from my hand. "You're jealous, bitter, pathetic. You always have been." For so long, I'd let her words bury me. But not now. The dam I'd held inside for years split open, and my voice rose to meet hers, sharp and clear. "Jealous? You stole boyfriends just to watch me suffer. You spread lies that followed me through school. You crawled into Travis's bed while I was planning a wedding. And you had the nerve to laugh while everyone else laughed at me. Don't you dare call me jealous." The hall went still. Every chair, every glass, every guest froze as my words rang out. Brielle's mouth opened, but no sound came. Her hands, trembling at her sides, clenched and unclenched like she was searching for an answer, a defense, anything. But there was nothing left for her to twist. No story she could spin that would erase what everyone had just heard and seen. The silence pressed down heavy, not hostile toward me, but suffocating for her. In that frozen moment, she wasn't the shining star or the charming sister. She was exposed, stripped of the illusions she'd hidden behind her whole life. In the weeks that followed, Brielle all but vanished. Calls went unanswered, her social calendar dissolved, and the invitations she once flaunted stopped coming. Relatives spoke her name in lowered voices, the shine of her reputation dulled beyond repair. The same family who used to laugh at her jokes now avoided mentioning her at all. I didn't feel the rush of victory I once imagined. What settled over me instead was quiet relief, like finally setting down a heavy bag I'd carried too long. I hadn't wanted to destroy her. What I wanted was space to live without her shadow pressing over me. And now, for the first time, that space existed. My parents, who had always excused her cruelty, looked at me differently. One evening, my father rested a hand on my shoulder and simply said, "You were stronger than we gave you credit for." My mother, uncharacteristically gentle, told me she admired my composure. Their words didn't erase the years of silence, but they mattered all the same. With the weight lifted, I began shaping a life that was mine alone. I signed the lease on a small apartment with sunlight streaming through wide windows, bought furniture secondhand, and placed every piece exactly where I wanted it. No comparisons, no constant ridicule, just my own space, humming with possibility. I still worked the same job, still lived modestly, but now each decision was deliberate, each boundary firm. And in that steadiness, I found pride. Maybe Brielle would always see me as the loser. But standing in my own place, surrounded by peace I carved out myself, I knew the truth. I had already won. Do you think I was right to finally stand up for myself? Or should I have given Brielle another chance? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like this.